The history of Rolex, how a young boy's vision came to be the world's most famous watch. In 1905, a young man named Hans Wilsdorf sat in a small office in London. He was only 24 years old, but he had a big dream. While everyone else was using pocket watches, Hans believed that wristwatches were the future. People laughed at him. Back then, only women and soldiers wore watches on their wrists. Real gentlemen used pocket watches, but Hans saw something different. Starting small, Hans started a company with his brother-in-law, Alfred Davis. They called it Wilsdorf Davis. They initially bought watches from other companies and sold them, but Hans hoped to do better. He wanted to manufacture the world's best wristwatches. The problem was that nobody accorded wristwatches respect. They saw them as toys or a fashion statement. Hans knew he needed to teach people. He needed to show them that a wristwatch would prove to be just as effective as a pocket watch. Hans made a deal with a Swiss company called Aegler. They would build the insides of the watches, the mechanism that made them work. Hans would design the outside and put it all together. His plan was simple: make watches that were beautiful and worked perfectly. In 1908, Hans needed a name for his watches. He tried hundreds of names. He wanted something that was short that people can quickly say in any language. After many tries, he came up with Rolex. No one knows for certain where this name came from, but Hans just said it felt right. It was easy to say and remember, proving the doubters wrong. Hans knew that nobody would believe his watches were good just because he said so. He needed proof. In 1910, one of his Rolex watches became the first wristwatch in history to have an official certificate awarded to it that it was accurate. This was big because until now, only the most expensive ship clocks were given these certificates. But Hans needed more proof. He got it in 1927 when a lady named Mercedes Gleitze tried to swim the English Channel. It was very difficult and dangerous. Hans asked her to wear a Rolex during the event. Mercedes was submerged in ice-cold water for more than 10 hours. When she finished, everyone assumed the watch would be ruined. But it wasn't. The watch stayed dry inside and continued running like usual. Hans was so excited that he bought the front page of a major newspaper to tell everyone about it. The headline read, "The Wonder Watch That Defies the Elements." This single ad completely changed everything for Rolex. Hans didn't stop there. He kept enhancing his watches. In 1926, Rolex invented the first water-resistant watch case. They called it the Oyster because it was shut as tightly as an oyster shell. In 1931, they invented a new way of automatically winding watches. Instead of manually winding your watch every day, it would wind itself as you moved your arm. These were not uncommon today, but when they were made, they were huge. No one had ever seen anything so massive. Rolex watches became more and more desirable with each new advancement, reaching new heights. The 1950s were Rolex's heyday. Two men climbed Mount Everest in 1953 for the first time in history. They were Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary. They used Rolex watches when they climbed to the top of the world's highest mountain. This made Rolex a hit everywhere in the world. Rolex used this success to introduce the Explorer watch. It was not just a watch, it was an explorer's watch and adventurer's watch. Those who bought it thought they could climb mountains too. Around the same time, Rolex made watches for all sorts of people. The Submariner was made for deep-sea divers. The GMT Master was made for airplane pilots that crossed over several countries. The Day-Date was made in gold and had the nickname of the President's Watch because several world leaders used it. When Hans Wilsdorf died in 1960, everyone wondered what would happen to Rolex. But Hans had been smart. He had set up a trust so the company could continue. This meant that Rolex would never worry about how much money to make for shareholders, but only how to make the best watches. The establishment preserved Hans's vision. They ensured that Rolex remained independent and made outstanding watches. They also ensured that Rolex watches remained unique by not producing too many of them. This made them even more desirable. Rolex today? Today, Rolex is the most famous watch brand in the world. They manufacture around 1 million watches per year, but there are waiting lists to buy them. Individuals wait years to get the watch of their choice. Used Rolex watches sell for millions of dollars at auctions. Celebrities sport Rolex timepieces, not because Rolex pays them to do so. They do so because Rolex represents success and success. From Bond on the silver screen to sporting icons like Roger Federer, Rolex is everywhere excellence is the yardstick. Hans Wilsdorf started with a modest idea: create the best wristwatch. He took that idea and turned it into much more. Rolex was not just a watch company anymore. It became a symbol of what man can do and what it is to wish to be the best. Hans's dream of creating the best watch in the world turned into the myth of one of the world's greatest brands. Today, when someone puts on a Rolex, they're wearing a piece of that dream.